Greetings. I want to tell you something about my life, a date that I will always remember, April 27th, 2023. It was the day I went to the hospital and had double hip replacement. That's kind of ordinary to have hip replacement, not double. Both of my hips were completely destroyed through life. And it sent me on a journey of seeking, which is what I've done my whole life regarding health, as to trying to find the why of something happening. Traditional thinking on health really doesn't investigate that. They investigate how do we get better, how do we feel better. I'm completely the opposite. I really am connected to what I call ancient wisdom. When I observe animals in nature, or I think deeply about the machine of our body and why does it malfunction? Why at 30 years old things are working and at 50 they quit working? Because there's a reason. It isn't just bad luck. It's not always genes, because that's actually been minimized by a lot of the studies. Well, when the physician who I really adored, who did my double hip replacement, a week later said, when I looked at your hips, they were completely dysfunctional and destroyed. Well, my journey sent me on a very aggressive path of the why. And I had investigated something earlier in my life, a few years, called oxalates. What are oxalates? Oxalates are actually compounds that plants have naturally within them that helps them to fight off predators. And we have something called kidney stones, that most of which are oxalate stones. Well, there's always been a connection between kidney stones, but there's never been a lot of looking into or research as far as what else can oxalates do that may be damaging us. And the really crazy part is that the things that we get oxalates from often are very healthy foods. The body makes about 15 to 20 milligrams of oxalates daily. If we're under 50 milligrams, then we're probably okay, maybe even up to 100. And there may be certain individuals that can detox anything, including tobacco and drugs. I'm not one of those. So looking into the history of oxalates, it was actually talked about in the medical literature in about 1850. Oxalates have been used as cleaning solutions, from radiator cleaners to you name it, because they're extremely abrasive. Actually, what an oxalate looks exactly like, not this large, more of a molecule, is glass. It's actually a nano piece of glass. Well, what I have come to the conclusion of is my hips were basically destroyed by healthy food. Yep, that's what I've come to that conclusion. Only a small list of them, because I am so connected to the fact that I feel our body is given the ability for self-healing in almost every case, but we have to remove what's harming it, is what I always say, and give it what it needs to build back up. Well, guess what? As all times in our life, sometimes we don't have the information necessary to make the kind of wise decisions we need. Well, that information really is not evident in searches or anything else. But I did a blood test when I started thinking about this oxalate theory and thinking, I wonder if I had oxalates. And it just happened that I did a blood test for oxalates, which actually is not very accurate, because you can have a lot of oxalates and it not show on a blood test, but mine was skyrocketing. My levels were about 10 times higher than they should be. That set off the alarm in me. And all of a sudden, I became a deep diver and seeker of the oxalate story. And here's what I want to share with people. Oxalates, I truly believe, in individuals who are sensitive or who are not detoxifying those oxalates, can host a myriad of symptoms that will never be diagnosed. You can't really use a blood test for accuracy. You can't do a biopsy. There's almost no way to actually medically give a diagnosis of this. So a lot of it is putting the pieces of the puzzle together. But I'll tell you, there's one absolute test that I can probably say is 90% accurate if you think that you may have oxalates. But before I tell you that, I want to list some of the many symptoms which I have confirmed with many people who have gone through this journey. Bone spurs, joint pains, of course, because anytime you have a piece of glass basically in between moving parts, you're going to have inflammation and destruction. Urinary tract issues, that is a very common one. Skin disorders, things like boils and the skin eruptions that are simply not identifiable. You don't know why they're happening. Brain fog, fatty liver, anemia, because oxalates can bind with this iron. Chronic fatigue, it's epidemic today. Insomnia, thyroid issues, burning in the bladder, and also vaginal pain for women that are just not being able to be treated. Boils, mood, connective tissue problems, lots of pelvic pain. Because wherever those glass particles end up finding themselves, you're going to have an issue. But here's the test. It's called dumping oxalates. When you contain in your joints or in your thyroid or in wherever these oxalates seem to have found a home, when you stop adding to the storehouse of oxalates by stopping all the foods that have oxalates in them, you will do something called dumping. All of a sudden the body realizes that it doesn't have any more coming in, so it actually starts getting rid in a small dose of the reserves that they've built up of these oxalates, and you will feel much worse. It is a very, very kind of hard journey to go on if you do it too aggressively, which is not a wise thing, but to end up testing yourself, I think it's the only medical disorder that you actually can remove something in order to get a diagnosis. And so if you go on a low to no oxalate diet for 2 to 4 weeks, you get no difference in how you feel, I would wager that you probably don't have a real issue with oxalates. But if you get far worse, or even if you get far better, but generally far worse is what happens, it will be very definite. It will not be a subtle feeling. So what are the foods? Let me tell you the foods that I actually consume for the past 40 plus years on an everyday basis. Raspberries I ate every single night for probably 20 years. Spinach, I told you we had about a budget of about 50 milligrams of oxalates. One serving of spinach has 450 milligrams of oxalates. 450. So the people buying the crates of spinach and making smoothies and doing all this, if their body's not set up for detoxifying, there's going to be issues. And as I did, the worse I got, the more I tried to be healthy, the more I wanted the nutrient-rich foods. But I didn't know about oxalates. Cooked celery and even raw celery. Potatoes are very, very high in oxalates. Turmeric, which is really odd because curcumin does not have oxalates, which is the concentrated form of turmeric. So quit doing turmeric, but then get curcumin if you want anti-inflammatory effects. Chocolate. I mean, there's a lot of good studies on chocolate and health, especially if you do the over 72%, but it's loaded with oxalates. Almonds I have lived on my entire life. The almond butters, the peanut butters, those two things, but especially almonds. I mean, it's supposed to be like the perfect food. Beets, didn't really eat a lot, but I did a lot of beet supplements. Black beans, most of all the nuts, and then lastly, not even a food, vitamin C over any regular amounts converts to oxalic acid. Wow! So what I did after I got the blood test is I went on this diet, and all of a sudden my pain doubled. I had pains where I didn't even realize that I had pains before because the oxalates were moving around. It's now been about a 9-month journey into this, and I am mainly far better at this time because I've got the plan of action, I've got the diet down. Don't have to be perfect on it. None of us do, because we do have a budget we can work within. But I want to encourage you to learn about this oxalate because it can be a life changer. You know, I've spent a lot of times in the woods over my past, about 35 years in certain seasons of the nature, and I love to observe animals. I have never seen an arthritic deer. Now, I've seen deers hobble because they've had injuries. Well, you might say, well, they just don't live long enough. People are getting these joint problems at 22 years old with oxalates. So if animals, why are we not more like them if they're living in nature? Well, they're not really eating oxalate foods. One good story about oxalates is rhubarb. Rhubarb has one of the highest levels of oxalates. And before our times that we live in now where they can grow things hydroponically, there was seasons for rhubarb. And in other countries, there's a lot of literature written about when rhubarb season came in, depression skyrocketed, pelvic pain skyrocketed, insomnia skyrocketed. Well, they didn't really know a lot about oxalic acid, even though it was named, but it was because that season of food came in and everybody was being toxic with it. So connecting these dots is very important for me and also to help me to help other people. So I encourage you to try to do the oxalate diet, and we're going to have a link below on the people that I recommend that I think you could learn from. One of the, I think, most important is Sally Norton, her book, Toxic Superfoods. Love her book, read it 3 times. She is a very good speaker and educator on this. And Dr. Saladino, who she's done some podcasts with, they are excellent at explaining this whole package of oxalates and what do we do about it. So I encourage you perhaps to look into this or at least into her Instagram, Sally Norton. Now, there are many lists around, and you have plenty of foods to eat also, so don't worry. Like all these foods in green are foods we can still eat, all the vegetables. The thing I had to cut out and really had problems or kind of wishes for is sometimes the chocolate, sometimes the beans, certainly the almonds. Can't eat, most of the protein bars have some type of nut butter, and what it does is when I eat it, I simply just do not feel my best. It doesn't always create the pain, but it can create foggy thinking. And I've noticed, especially my daughter and I have talked, because she's similar to me, that foggy thinking seemed to come from eating nuts. And this has been an ongoing conversation for years that we've had, but I didn't really know, why would that happen? Well, for me, I do point my finger to the oxalates. Well, so the thing to do is do the diet. There is an app right now I'm using called OxaPure, OXIPUR, that lists the amount of oxalates in each food. It's free. If you want to be deep into this, you'll need some kind of list. Sally Norton's book has a great list in it also. But the last piece of this puzzle, first is diet. The other part is understanding that we have enzymes, we have biochemistry within us that helps to detox many chemicals, but there's certain ones that oxalates have to have. Every morning, every evening, I would line up my 7 bottles of these certain nutrients. And it got to be old, and I started doing more research and realizing there wasn't anyone who was actually producing an oxalate detox formula. So after many, many hundreds of hours and talking to companies, a product called OxaGuard I formulated, and it requires 2 pills twice a day. It gives you what we feel at this time the exact amount of detoxifying nutrients that is necessary for our human body to take this certain glass compound and help get rid of it, because just releasing it, if you don't have the access to get rid of it, it's going to keep staying in the body. What are those? Well, B1, B6, but only as pyridoxal 5-phosphate, not the regular B6. Then we've got biotin in pretty high amounts, very important. We have to have some calcium. Calcium binds with oxalates and helps it to keep from damaging us. That's why sometimes the people who don't eat enough calcium are far worse off than the people who do, because at least if you eat a food with oxalates, it can bind with that calcium and kind of prevent it from harming us. And then you've got magnesium, you've got potassium, and MSM. We need sulfur to help detoxify. So know that there is help available. Know that if you've chronically been never feeling well, all these aches and pains come on, you're getting worse with the years, maybe it's not just your birthdays. It's going to have some influence. But again, I've seen some old deer, they still run pretty darn fast in those woods, and until they finally reach the last season of their life, they are not as quick as they were, but they don't hobble, and they seem to get up quickly, and they get to be able to do what they want. That's not happening in today's society, where so many people are struggling, and we're missing the boat because that's not a deficiency of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories any more than insomnia is a deficiency of Ambien. Sometimes they're necessary, but they are hurting our body to use too much of those. So let's get to the root. I want to get to the kernel of why did I need double hip replacement when it didn't make much sense. Not that taking care of myself the way I have should make me immortal, because it's certainly not going to happen. We rent these bodies. They're going to dissolve pretty much probably on time. But we want the quality. We want health span. I want health span more than lifespan. And I want to look deeply into ancient wisdom, my biochemistry, science, and also common sense of connecting dots. I don't have to have the absolute 100 studies done with placebo controlled. There's something called common sense in this country that sometimes I think the medicine and the health conversations lack. So I encourage you, learn more about it. If you feel like this is something that you want to pursue, just simply go on a no oxalate diet. If it makes you far worse, probably that's an issue you need to deal with. And you can do individual nutrients, you can do OxaGuard, or you can do nothing. But you have to do certain nutrients, because if you're deficient, you will not end up getting better. How long does it take to get better? Most people are better in a couple of months, but honestly, it's a long-term process. It depends on how much oxalates you have deposited, how old you are, and how long it's been going on. I actually anticipate that I probably will never get rid of all of them, but I'm already so much better that I can do perfectly fine the way that I am right now. There's your tips for empowering the rest of your life, not just this week. And I want to make sure that you realize that we're at the cutting edge of this oxalate story. We're going to learn more as we go on, but we got enough now to change your life. Thank you.